100 Days with Jesus. Um, Take those off. A little glare going on there. But yeah, 100 Days with Jesus, and going through a chapter of the Gospels, each one of the, honestly, 100 plus days that will be covering different, the story of Jesus. So tonight, the focus is Mark 8. We had just, shared all these things from Mark 7 last night. Today, Jesus has this large crowd again that have come out and they're with him, and it's been a long day and they've run out of food and they're in a remote place, kind of like what happened a couple of chapters back in Mark 6. We also covered it Matthew 14 with the 5,000. They had, there's so many of them. It had been such a long day. It was coming to the end of the day, and they were in a remote place, and they had no food. Well, same things happened again here. And Jesus expresses, and last time the disciples came to Jesus and said, "Hey, Jesus, what are we going to do?" But this time Jesus initiated things. He said, "I have compassion on the crowd because they've already stayed with me throughout the day, and they're getting hungry. I don't want to send them away hungry. I'm afraid they may faint." And then the disciples are like, "Well, what are we supposed to do?" It's like they completely forgot about what happened before. It's like, "What are we supposed to do, Jesus?" And Jesus is like, "Well, how much food do you have? How much do we have?" He said, "We have 7 loaves." Jesus had all the people sit down. And he took those 7 loaves and he broke them. And he started handing them out to the disciples, and they were handing them out to the people. And they found a few fish, and he blessed those too. He started handing that out to the people. He divided the bread, he divided the fish. He broke the bread, he divided the fish, and he handed out enough bread and enough fish to where it fed 4,000 people, and then there were 7 baskets left over. Look, this is not, some people may say, "Well, hey, you know, did we get the stories mixed up? Is this two different versions of the same?" No, it's two different occasions, two different stories on two different occasions. Where one time Jesus fed 5,000 men plus women and children. And here's another occasion where he feeds 4,000 people. It doesn't specify 4,000, and not in Mark's version anyway. But he fed 4,000 people here. So that's a total of surely 10,000 plus people if you count the women and children in the 5,000. But two different occasions though. So he fed the 4,000. There was enough for 7 baskets left over after it was all said and done. And then they get into the boat and they're heading across the sea, and Jesus says, "Beware, be on guard against the yeast of the Pharisees and those who follow Herod." And just to beware of that. And then the disciples are kind of arguing and bickering among themselves. "Oh man, we forgot the bread." And they're arguing about the bread. They think they think the bread is like, "Oh, we forgot the bread. We don't have any bread." Jesus is like, "Look, have you forgotten about the 5,000? Have you forgotten about the 4,000? I mean, are your hearts that hard? Are you that?" Jesus is like, "Is your heart hardened? Do you have eyes and not see, and you have ears and not hear? And do you not remember when I broke the 5 loaves and the 5,000, how many baskets full of pieces of bread that you had left over?" He asked them, and they said 12. And then he said, "Well, do you remember when we fed the 4,000, how many baskets of bread that we had left?" And they said 7. And he said to them, "Don't you understand yet? Don't you get it?" And the whole thing he was talking about was the yeast of the Pharisees and those who follow after Herod, or follow closely after Herod, and promote the idea of Herod taking over. And anyway, all that being said, he was just warning them against the toxicity, the corruption of making gods out of the teachings of the Pharisees, when it was really honestly apart from God. It was based on the teachings of God, but they had made it all something else. And then if you make gods out of the Roman government over God, not that you shouldn't respect the authority of the Roman government, but making a god out of the Roman government was not what they were to do. Anyway, not to get lost in that, but at the same time to at least touch on it some. And then they came across Bethsaida. And in Bethsaida, they brought him a blind man. And Jesus applied this saliva to his eyes, the saliva of his to his eyes, and then asked him if he could see. And he said, well, yes, I see people. And that's just awesome in and of itself. But they look like trees. We see people, it looks like trees walking around. And then he placed his hands on his eyes again, and then he could see clearly, as clear as day. And then Jesus and the disciples, they go to this area, they leave Galilee, and they go to this place called Caesarea Philippi. In Caesarea Philippi, he says, who do people say that I am? And they answered, some say John the Baptist, some say Elijah, some say one of the prophets. But then he said, who do you say that I am? And then Peter pipes up. Peter was one to really speak very quickly. And sometimes it just got him in a bunch of trouble. He stuck his foot in his mouth. He stuck his other foot in his mouth. And it's like, and he would say some really not so great things. And it's actually about to happen again here in a minute, but not right now. Right now, as Peter speaks quickly, he speaks very quickly, very confidently, and he speaks rightly and appropriately. He says, Peter answers, says, you are the Messiah. And then Jesus strictly warned him, and Matthew goes into a little bit more detail about that in Matthew 16, and we'll get to that in a couple of days. And I love the fact that they tell the same stories and they give different details to the stories, not conflicting details, but complementing details. It's the beauty of the tapestry of the Gospels. But he strictly warned them to tell no one about him. And then Jesus, after that, goes and says, hey, we're about to go to Jerusalem, and when we do, the elders and the chief priests and the scribes, they're going to reject him. He's going to be killed. And then he's going to rise after 3 days. It's like they missed that part altogether. It's like they missed all of that, honestly. And that plays out later on as to why I'm saying that. But he was openly talking about this. And then Peter took him aside. Like Peter knows it. Look, like I said, he said the most awesome thing just before this. But at this moment, he said one of the most awful things. Peter took him aside and began, and it's human, right? Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. But turning around and looking at the disciples, he rebuked Peter and said, he rebuked Peter because Peter had no business rebuking Jesus. He said, get behind me, Satan. It's like Satan, one moment Peter said this wonderful thing and Jesus compliments him and he encourages him, and then it's like it goes to his head and Satan puts this thing in him to say afterward. It's amazing how quickly something like that can happen. And we're all guilty of being prone to that. But then he says, get behind me, Satan, because you're not thinking about God's concerns, but man's. And then Mark 8 finishes out by him summoning the crowd along with his disciples. He said to them, if anyone wants to be my follower, he must deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whoever wants to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life because of me, talking about himself and the gospel, will save it. For what does it, I want anybody that's listening to this at this point or catch this at this point, thank you for hanging in there, by the way, and keeping in there. But here it says, for what does it benefit a man to gain the whole world, yet lose his life? What can a man give in exchange for his life? For whoever is ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, the Son of Man will also be ashamed of him when he comes in the glory of his Father with his holy angels. Jesus was the best. He's the real deal. He was the Messiah. He is the Messiah. He's the one that came to rescue us from our sinfulness. No one else could save us like Jesus. And that's why he came to save us, because no one else could. And he was willing to. If you've not taken up your cross and decided to follow him today, if you've taken it up and you've kind of swayed and kind of strayed, get back on the narrow way. Get back to following the Jesus way. Following after him. If you've never taken up your cross and decided to follow him, do it today. Make that decision. There's no better decision in your life than to make the decision to follow Jesus Christ. He's the best. Be blessed.